Ladies, gentlemen, and anyone else, welcome back to the actual news. I watch the news so you don't have to. Look, I've been pretty patient in terms of saying that the Trump administration sucks and is stupid and is fucking everything up, but I think it's time. And look, if you're still not mad or upset about what they're doing, if you were with Trump and you are thinking, no, we're still winning and I can't handle all this winning, you're probably just not paying attention to what's going on. Or, perhaps not fully grasping it. So, in short, Trump had basically had three big tenets of his campaign this year. There were three major pillars, three major things that he wanted to do, right? It was DOGE, it was the trade war, and it was immigration. And these things were supposed to help ordinary working class Americans. And guess what? He has failed miserably at this point at all of them. DOGE, right? As I mentioned last episode, DOGE was supposed to save the government money, it was supposed to decrease spending. DOGE has, in fact, increased spending, okay, or spending has increased under DOGE, but DOGE has also fired a bunch of federal employees and a bunch of businesses have lost federal contracts. So, at the helm of Elon Musk, a bunch of people lost their jobs, a bunch of businesses lost a bunch of money, and government spending has still gone up. DOGE has failed so miserably that Steve Bannon is calling out Elon Musk and saying that DOGE needs an audit. Like, oh, I think the government. Literally, what he's saying is the Department of Government Efficiency needs to take a closer look at the Department of Government Efficiency. Like, the Republican Party is currently so dysfunctional that one guy who did a Sieg Heil is mad at another guy that did a Sieg Heil. Like, your Nazis can't even get along. Trouble in Auschwitz? So, DOGE, again, miserable failure. And if you want, some of the numbers on that, basically Elon had said he thinks that he could save us $2 trillion. He saved us $150 billion. And spending under the Pentagon went up $1 trillion, which means you're up $850 billion at least. And by the way, you can cut spending in places like USAID, and that can then screw us value-wise in other ways. Like, this guy Chris Murphy sort of like accidentally admitted that a lot of what USAID does is it gives a little bit of health care to a country, and then we then gain access to that country's rare minerals, which we need to do stuff like make batteries, even to make weapons. Okay, and that brings me to the next little goal that Trump had, which was this trade war. Okay, so the trade war was Trump essentially putting these tariffs in place to then gain leverage over other countries. And at this point, it's become clear that he didn't even really have much of a plan, right? Like, we raised tariffs on Japan. Japan came to us and said, okay, we give in. What do you want? And we literally didn't have an answer. We could have asked for anything. We could have been like, stop doing hentai. It's weird. And they would have been like, okay. We could have been like, we want Mario to be American now. Just being Italian and from Brooklyn, so an implied Italian American, is not enough. But still, Nothing. And look, the big trade war is not with Japan or some of these other countries. Really, it's with China. And China is just like they just had an actual plan because they knew that Trump was going to try this, and he tried it a little bit in his first term. They essentially are just not even answering the guy's calls. And Trump is getting desperate to communicate with them because a bunch of retail CEOs came to him and said, hey, if we don't do something about this, there's going to be like major shortages in like 2 weeks at like Walmart and like massive price increases. And it seems like Trump has backed off enough on our end that that won't happen, although you still will see some shortages and some price increases. But China's plan, similar to ours actually in some ways, is to decrease the amount of goods they have to bring in overseas and manufacture more stuff within their country. And to do that, they're sending the citizens an economic stimulus package, which we did like one fucking time during COVID, and then everybody shit their pants. You know, we gave American citizens $1,200 and then gave massive corporations trillions of dollars. And for the next 3 years, everyone blamed inflation on like you getting a $1,200 check to buy some groceries while you were massively unemployed. I digress. So, trade war, like, not going well. I won't even get into the specifics of all the financial markets, but basically, when the stock market goes down, at the very least, the bond market usually goes up, and interest rates might come down a little bit, but it's getting to the point now where the stock market went down and then the bond market didn't even go up, which means that people are putting their money not into the US but into different places. So like gold went up, I think Bitcoin went up a little bit, and just other currencies in other countries went up. Which means that by him doing these little trade maneuvers and trying to gain leverage over countries, we have gained nothing and just lost value in the US dollar. And, you know, shit is probably going to get more expensive. I will say that gas is down a little bit, but we have not increased supply, which means that demand is just down, and demand of gas going down is usually a pretty big recession indicator, or worse, you know, a depression indicator. Third little tenet of Trump's administration this time around has been immigration. And, you know, Trump basically said that we're going to deport a lot of undocumented immigrants, and we're going to do that because it'll free up jobs for Americans. I do think that from an American worker standpoint, you can argue that immigration drives down wages for documented citizens. You could say that workers are paid less because business owners are able to find undocumented immigrants who will do it for less than what a citizen would do it for. But that's not what Republicans have argued. They're basically just trying to say, no, we're going to deport whoever we want. They tried to deport this guy a few weeks ago now, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. It became a huge news story. They had already admitted that they deported him, or were in the process of doing so, through an administrative error. And then the courts were like, you can't do that. And then they were like, well, we're going to do it anyway. And basically, they're just being told they can't. Trump, in response to judges ruling against ICE and deportations, Trump has arrested a judge, which Hitler also did. And look, it is totally unfair to compare Trump to Hitler. Hitler improved the economy. It's just, and look, I'm not even a Republican, dude. I'm not a conservative at all. But I'm just saying, if you are, If you had these things as goals in mind to improve your life, you should be pissed too. Unless you're like a very wealthy oligarch, it's not going well for you right now. And I would guess that very few oligarchs listen to the actual news. Just a hunch. If I'm looking at anything positive right now from these guys, it is they're trying to make an effort, or they're trying to project that they're making an effort to improve declining birth rates. So the Trump administration has said that they may offer out $5,000 to people who have a kid. And let me just say that if you think $5,000 is a good deal to have a kid, please do not have a kid. And those programs don't work anyway. They do them in other countries. They've tried it in many ways. It's actually sort of interesting that no matter how you try to incentivize people to have kids in these more advanced societies, people just don't, the more comfortable life gets. And I think that's because, I saw an interesting theory on it at some point, which is that in rural places where people have more kids, it's more so because kids can be staff. You can send a 6-year-old down to the fields to pick various crops. You can't really do that in our modern day society. It's tough to get your 6-year-old to work a blue collar job. He can't really be a plumber or a white collar job. I know there are a lot of American parents now who would love to have their kids just become a CEO. And I'm sure there's people doing that. There's some dumbass on Twitter that read a success thread, where it's 5 things I'm doing with my kid to make him a future Fortune 500 CEO. Every morning before I feed him, I make him pitch me 3 new startup ideas. Dude, this kid is just going to kill you. I digress. What's interesting about what's going on with Trump now is how often history repeats itself, or at least rhymes. So Trump's administration so far is starting to mirror Herbert Hoover's. And if you don't know your history, Herbert Hoover tried to impose tariffs, which was not the only reason, but did help lead to the Great Depression. And the Great Depression then caused a lot of people to take a sharp turn left. Communism, socialism started to become popular. In response to that, the ruling class of the U.S. sort of allowed Franklin Delano Roosevelt to give workers some concessions, such as better wages, unions, and Medicare, not for all, but for people, I believe, 65 and above. And it truly did become a situation where things turned around because, whatever the stupid phrase is, the night is darkest before dawn. Things got so bad that workers got so mad that they became desperate enough to start considering communism. So rich people started going, whoa, 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 let's just get you some better wages. And that might be what's going on now. Your leading Dem candidate for 2028 right now is AOC. And I would guess that there's some sort of concession where they allow a guy more like Pete Buttigieg, who I don't like. Buttigieg has the vibe of a guy who would cover up his test when you're trying to cheat off of it. Come on, man. We're all just trying to win here. But I could see a situation where it's Buttigieg and then AOC is running to the left of him and either becomes VP or gets a cabinet position, maybe Secretary of Labor or some stuff. And then you see the ruling class starting to allow some unions, some better wages, etc., because what there's an attempt at now is just not working. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on. But again, shit could also just completely fall through and get totally worse in a lot of ways. And, we could live in some kind of a technocracy with Elon Musk ruling over us with his lay epic iron fist. God, he is annoying. That's kind of the other funny thing is like you talk about jumping back to birth rates, people being very wealthy and not having a lot of kids, and people being poor and having a lot of kids. There is a breaking point where a person like Epstein or Elon Musk will have a lot of kids, right? Like Elon Musk has 14 kids, but a lot of them are via IVF. So like Elon Musk is the only guy in the world who could have 14 kids and still not be getting a lot of pussy. And you know what? I think for today, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the actual news. Make sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the show. Keep an eye on my socials. I'm going to be dropping a new stand up special very soon. And I got some tour dates coming up as well for stand up. So I thank you very much, and I love you. And I'll see you next week. Folks, check out Magic Spoon protein treats for a healthy and delicious snack. I think it's healthy. Healthy is kind of like a relative term these days. I don't think anyone knows anything. Remember like Cliff Bars? These are healthy like Cliff Bars were, where it's kind of like it's just a candy bar, and they threw protein in it or whatever. And people thought Cliff Bars were healthy because there was just like a guy climbing a mountain on the wrapper, and you would just eat 8 of them and be like, yeah, I might run a marathon tomorrow. I don't know. And again, what is healthy? Clearly, nobody knows. What is healthy? Nobody has any idea. Okay, like, like are eggs good for me? I don't know, because the only nutritional information source I have is a reel where a very professional looking person says, "Don't ever eat eggs," and then the next reel is like, "All you should be eating are eggs." I Nobody knows. RFK replaced all the vaccines with beef tallow. Is that good? Maybe. Anyway, I got to get better at these ad reads. Magic Spoon protein treats. Check them out, or don't. I don't make much money off of this. Thanks so much for checking out today's episode. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share, go to theactualnews.net and check out our Patreon for bonus content. And we'll see you again next week.